1787, public opinion about the Constitution was pretty evenly divided. Those who wanted the Constitution were called Federalists, largely because of the Federalist Papers, a series of articles written by Alexander Hamilton, James Madison, and John Jay. They wrote the Federalist Papers to convince voters in New York to ratify the Constitution, and since New York did eventually ratify the document, I guess they worked. But we should listen to both sides of the argument in the Clone Zone. So joining us in the Clone Zone today will be Federalist Clone and Anti-Federalist Clone. Let's hear from Federalist Clone first. Fetty? Can I call you Fetty?
No. The Federalists were the incredibly intelligent Americans who thought that a strong central government would benefit the country as a whole. They tended to come from cities, and often they represented commercial classes, especially wealthy people who had lent money to the government during the Revolution. They liked the new Constitution because they felt that a strong national government would pay its debts, and this was good for business. They also tended to want stronger ties with England, again, because England was a good trading partner. Given the raging success of the Articles government, it's pretty clear that the Federalists were right.
Okay, now let's hear from Anti-Federalist Clone. How do you respond, Auntie? I'm not your aunt. Sure, Federalists were right to believe in tyranny. Anti-Federalists were right to be skeptical of a large government that would trample on our individual liberties. They didn't want a big government that would tax them to death and possibly take away their slaves. In general, Anti-Federalists felt that states would be the best protectors of people's rights and liberties because, being smaller, they would be more responsive to people's needs. Okay. The Anti-Federalists published pamphlets and articles too, but we weren't quite as organized, so we didn't have a coherent set of Anti-Federalist papers to push on government students. Okay, you seem really mad about this.
I am.
But you eventually lost the debate.
I did.
Huzzah!
How come he got to shoot fireworks?
I didn't know he was going to.
I wanted to shoot fireworks.
I'm sorry. Next time you can have fireworks.
So the Federalist position won out, and the Constitution was ratified, and that's the government that Americans have been living under ever since. Hooray! Because the Constitution was passed, we tend to think that everyone loved it, but it wasn't nearly as clear-cut as hindsight makes it appear. Eventually, the Federalists had to offer another compromise, promising a Bill of Rights in the first 10 amendments. This isn't called one of the constitutional compromises because it happened outside of the convention, but it was yet another example of how different interests had to give a little in order to get a constitution passed.
The first 10 amendments to the U.S. Constitution, also known as the Bill of Rights, were ratified or passed over 200 years ago. But even though they're a bit, old, these first 10 amendments are still the most debated and discussed section of our Constitution today. So can you remember what they are? Let's take a look. The First Amendment is the freedom of speech, press, religion, assembly, and petition. This may be the most revered of the amendments. The First Amendment protects our rights to say and write our opinions, worship how we please, assemble together peacefully, and petition our government if we feel the need. The Second Amendment is the right to bear arms. The original intent of the Second Amendment was to protect colonists from the invading British soldiers, but it now guarantees that you have the right to own a gun to defend yourself and your property. The Third Amendment is called the Quartering Amendment. It was written in response to the British occupation and as a result of the colonists having to house or quarter soldiers in their homes during the American Revolution. Because of this amendment, our government can never force us to house soldiers in our home. The Fourth Amendment is the right to search and seizure. The police can't come into our home without a search warrant and take our personal property. Today, many concerns have arisen about our rights to privacy and technology. For example, can the government track your location with your smartphone, or can social media postings such as on Facebook and Twitter be used without a warrant? On to the fifth. It's all about due process. You've probably heard the phrase, "I plead the fifth," in movies or on TV. They're talking about the Fifth Amendment, which says that you don't have to take the witness stand against yourself if you may end up incriminating yourself. Okay, we're halfway done. The Sixth and Seventh Amendments are about how the legal system works. If you're accused of a crime, you have the right to a speedy public trial and an impartial jury. You also have the right to a lawyer and the right to take the stand if you choose. This is important because it will prevent the accused from sitting in prison forever and insists that the prosecution proceed with undue delay. The Seventh says you have the right to a jury trial where 12 impartial peers decide your innocence or guilt in the courtroom as opposed to a judge doing it all alone. The Eighth Amendment prohibits cruel and unusual punishment. Is a death penalty cruel? Is it unusual? It's hard for Americans to agree on the definitions of cruel and unusual. The Ninth and 10th Amendments are called the non-rights amendments. They say that the rights not listed in the Bill of Rights are retained by the people in the states. You have other rights that are not listed in the Constitution, and the states have the right to make their own policies, like instituting state taxes. So, now you know all 10 amendments. Can you remember them all? If not, remember this. The Bill of Rights are a crucial piece of American history, and though society has undergone many changes these past 200 and some years, the interpretation and application of these amendments are as vital today as they were when they were written.
Each time we see one of these mass shootings, our thoughts and prayers are not enough. It's not enough.
Vice News has been going around the world talking to people about the big issues and asking how they think the news should cover them. Today, we talk about gun control in America versus the rest of the world. If you want to tell us what's important, you can do it with a Skype video message or with the hashtag Vice News.
Gun control in the United States seems to be very lax, especially compared to the rest of the world.
I grew up in Naples, Italy. There are only two categories of people who have guns, and that is mafiosi and cops.
Gun control laws in the United States exist, but they allow for a lot of go-around. So my sense is that if people really wanted to obtain a weapon, they would be able to, regardless of background check situations and things like that.
I find it ironic and curious how in the United States this idea of freedom is associated with bearing a gun.
From a foreign perspective, they are out of hand.
In Russia, if you want to shoot a gun, it's easy. There are shooting ranges that are widely accessible, hunting permits that are fairly easy to get. But in general, owning a gun in Russia at your house is illegal.
Loose gun control in the United States trickles into Mexico. The highest percentage of weapons in Mexico coming directly from the United States.
I guess yes, it's really hard to get a gun in France, I think. At least I don't know anyone who has a gun for other reason than hunt.
I'm from New Zealand, and no one really has a gun. Even the police on the street, they don't carry firearms. So even seeing a police officer with a firearm it's a little bit scary to me.
In my country, it's very similar as in the United States. You have to take a psychological test, go to the polygon, shoot some bullets.
Prohibiting anything makes it automatically a business. Yes, it must be regulated, but with a complete understanding of the society and with a background education for it.
States like Massachusetts and Connecticut already have these really effective processes. I had to get 2 letters of recommendation, pay over $100 to get a background check.
I think that it is very scary for politicians to take a stand on gun control, because if you take a heavy stance, you're losing 50% of the people that you want to vote for you.
Despite massive public agreement that guns need to be controlled more effectively, the lobby is dictating policy right now.
I believe the United States should have stricter gun control laws, but I'd also like to see an emphasis placed on mental health awareness.
When you look at the people who are committing massacres like the Virginia Tech massacre or Columbine school shooting or Sandy Hook shooting, these are all extremely psychologically disturbed people who were still able to get their hands on guns.
I'd like to see a society where we see both stricter gun control as well as the ability to police ourselves.
I do feel that a responsible person will use a gun responsibly. You know, it's come down to a situation where non-violent, peace-loving person like me will also feel safer with a gun right next to me.
I think communities can do more to unite and educate, because I've been in a lot of situations where gun owners are collective and responsible and secure, and they're very disciplined.
Outside of actually controlling firearms being sold, it comes down to education of it. I am well aware of how to properly operate, maintain, and store a firearm.
My sister has a gun. Her daughter, who's 10 years old, plays with her like in the field and uses the gun, but she educates them and she's smart about it.
Carrying a firearm can be justified here in Israel because of everything that's going on. You need to be able to protect yourself.
Some people can certainly police themselves, but we need to be prepared for the worst. We need to have policies that protect us and our country from the people who can't responsibly own guns.